dear friends. You might recognize our guest today, Dr. Jill Carnahan. She happens to be my doctor as well. So, I thank goodness I don't get to see her very often because I don't have that many health issues. But she's based here in Boulder, Colorado as well. I didn't even prepare your resume, which I'm sure is very long and very impressive. I just want to kind of keep it very real and very conversational and to have a really good chat between us and then see what kind of questions we get from our audience as well. This topic landed in a very timely fashion because, I'm realizing today that, as much as like you're an MD, I'm a functional practitioner, right? And food is my passion, obviously. And, so are supplements and herbs, right, as an herbalist. But I think there's a big part of our healing that comes from the things that, are related to our mindset, to our belief system, our faith, our boundaries, toxicity from relationships, and so on and so forth. And so, I know you teach at IFM. You are famous in the medical world for obvious reasons. Well, the reasons is that you're an incredible researcher. You bring in a lot to the table. You've carved out certain specialty areas. Like I think a lot of people probably know you from a mold perspective. Others know you from just working with patients, the most difficult patients, right? And that's why you've got a wait list of however number of years to get. And I think your patient list is closed now. Isn't it right?
Yes, we are bringing a new doc, so we will have that open soon. But right now, yeah.
Good. So, and so it was really refreshing to get a copy of your book, Unexpected. It's on a pre-order right now. That because it really talks about, you can have gone as an MD, like full blown into making this into a medical book, 100%, right? That just gives you the protocols and really diving deep. But you went in a completely different tangent. It's very autobiographical, right? It's really about your life story in here, which hasn't been easy. And then, and then it's got protocols in it. So my first question is for you, why did you write a book like this versus, just diving deep into research and the medical side of things and then creating protocols for mold and toxicity and this and that? And instead you chose to kind of combine in a very unusual way the world of medicine and the world of our belief system.
Yeah, I love that question, Magdalena, because that was at the heart of how do I do this? And I'll tell you, it's funny because I have all these wonderful books by my colleagues on the back shelf here, and so many 30 days to improve your health or 21 days on an autoimmune protocol, and wonderful, practical, amazing resources behind me. But I noticed for me personally, the books that I really was like lost in, and every night I couldn't wait to pick it up. It was someone's story. And you can, think of all the kinds of biographies you've ever read. And as a young child, books were my resource I loved books. I wanted to be a librarian before I was a physician. And I remember the books that brought me in and allowed me to see a reflection of myself and allowed me to transform personally. They were all based around story and stories that connected tissue. And 8 years ago, when I had this on my heart to write, I knew I had to tell my story because I've been through a lot and I've overcome a lot. But it's not really about me. It's about if I can allow the reader to see what's possible, like that they can do it just like me. No one's different than me. I'm not better than anyone else. But what's funny is as I went to the publishers and started to, post or, say, this is what I want to do. Here's my proposal. I got over and over again, you can't write a biography unless you're really famous. Like you can't write about, I just got told no. But in my heart, I knew this was important. And that for me and for you listening, or if you read the book, all of us have our own journeys. I am not unique in that. You have a journey, I have a journey, and everyone listening has their own journeys. And if we can look at those journeys as teachers and allow them to transform us in the process and take those lessons and then share them with our friends and family and world and whatever circle of influence we have. And you've done that, Magdalena, beautifully, because you've taken your story and now you've transformed it into a place where you enlighten and empower your listeners and the people that follow you. And I wanted to do the same with my story. But then at the same time, I wanted practical tips. So we worked long and hard of how do we mix these two and keep you in that story so you really get engaged, but also get the practical tips. And that's where it ended up. It is a memoir. It's called kind of a prescriptive memoir. But on the sidebars, there's tons of those practical tips on how to.
Yeah, exactly. So So let's talk about your story, because I kind of know you, as my physician, and we know each other from the Boulder community, but I didn't realize like that you had that much stuff going on. I knew about your breast cancer, so let's hear that story. And then I didn't realize you had Crohn's disease as well. So that can total pile up: cancer, autoimmunity, and then mold exposure. So you've got it all really stacked. So tell us a little bit about that story and what it really taught you.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in Illinois, one of 5 kids, oldest girl, and really a beautiful life. But what was unbeknownst to me was part of the thing that probably led to my early diagnosis of breast cancer, invasive, aggressive breast cancer at 25 years old, was growing up on a farm with chemicals, pesticides, and those were just part of the puzzle. But looking back, I had to look back to my roots and say, what led to this? And at 25, in my third year of medical school, I was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. And for those of you who, many of us know people who have had breast cancer. Probably every single listener knows someone, maybe even a close family member, friend, maybe even yourself. So it's very, very common. But in older women, 50s, 60s and on, it can be more slow growing. It can still be aggressive. In younger women, it's almost always incredibly aggressive. It's a death sentence. So I was faced with the battle of my life. I ended up taking 3 drug chemotherapy, 6 rounds, like as basically as high a dose as they could possibly get without killing me and without causing my heart to stop beating. So incredibly aggressive drug therapy, multiple surgeries, radiation, everything. I came out of that 9 months later. I'd been off of medical school doing the treatment, so sick, so malnourished. My gut was destroyed. I had no hair. I learned a new term for bald. It's glaborious, which I thought sounded nicer than bald. Hairless is what it means, but I would use, I'm glaborious, and I was just bald. But all that to say, I got through that, went through just really toxic therapy, and I feel like it saved my life. But what I didn't know then was it destroyed my gut. On the 20 years since then, I've been rebuilding my immune system and gut. The cancer was easy, but the effects of the therapy were a lot more long lasting. And I don't regret it. I tell people nowadays, take the information you have at the moment and make the best decision you can about treatment, and don't look back, don't second guess. So I've never regretted it, but it was so toxic, and I had a predisposition towards Crohn's genetically. So within 6 months, all of a sudden I started having cyclical fevers, pain in my abdomen, more weight loss, more malnutrition. I ended up passing out during one of my rotations and ended up in the ER myself as a patient. And then the surgeon next day, he came into my room and he had opened up an abscess and said, Jill, you have Crohn's disease. So very quickly after my breast cancer, I was diagnosed with Crohn's. Now, I was told it was incurable. I was told I would need lifelong drugs or surgery, probably part of my colon resected, and just there was nothing else to do. And I remember asking as I left the gastroenterologist's office, doc, does diet have anything to do with it? Can I do anything with food? And he just did not even pause. This was 20 years ago. He said, Jill, diet has nothing to do with it. And in my heart, this is part of the trust your intuitive sense. I did not know much. I did not know that nutrition could affect Crohn's, but my heart said, that can't be true. That cannot be true. This is the gut. And I went on a search to prove him wrong. And I found a specific carbohydrate diet, which is one of many that can be helpful. And within 2 weeks of changing my diet, my fevers, my diarrhea, my pain was gone. Now, it took me several years to really be considered cured of Crohn's because I worked on the gut microbiome and became, in the process, somewhat of a gut expert. But that whole journey allowed me to understand that, number one, diet does have a lot to do with everything, especially autoimmune disease. And it was really a shift because I'm in medical school getting trained at this time, and my own experiences really flavored how I practice medicine because I realized that these things are powerful healers.
So, I just want to mention a couple of things. Right at the beginning of your story, like, you mentioned about growing up on the farm. One of the things you have in the book is a list of all the different chemicals that were used on the farm that your dad used, right? Yeah. Obviously, unknowingly, right, how toxic they were. And what I want to stress here is like, we have this, often this debate with our community about toxins that are safe now. Like, for example, like one of my pet peeves is going to be pans, things like, the nonstick pans that are non-toxic, yes, green pans, right?
Yes.
And here's the thing, you guys, it's like in the United States, it's really fascinating how you can use a compound with very little safety profile until it is then shows that it's toxic, right? In Europe, it's the other way around. Like, you need to prove first that it's safe, yes, before it's used. Here is like kind of like, we become the guinea pigs. as consumers. And so people go, yeah, Magdalena, but the frying pans that the company says it doesn't have Teflon and is non-toxic. And the truth of the matter is that I've asked that before, and they refuse to show what's inside there because they say it's a patent and it's a secret formula, right? At the same time, they have no safety records most of the time of these things. So, it's just like really defaulting to things that we know are safe, and not relying on somebody else telling us, otherwise. It's so key in your entire journey. And it kind of brings me to, so like, for example, my intuition has always been, all the green pans and whatever pans, right? I'm just like, I had it for 6 months and I thought it was rubbish and I threw it away. And my intuition was like, something isn't right about it, right? And of course, now I know better. And so I use a completely, things like carbon steel pans and etc. But I want to circle back to what you said about intuition. And, can we talk a little bit about like your experience of applying intuition in your own healing journey? And what are some of the things that you see with your own patients, and something that we can impart with our audience here today about how to use intuition when you are faced with a medical situation and decisions?
Okay, absolutely. And if you don't mind, real quick, there's something so relevant to Colorado on the toxins you just mentioned, something like the Teflon, the Gore-Tex, the PFAOs that were originally in these nonstick pans. Now they recently tested our state of Colorado. Every water supply that was tested was contaminated with PFAOs. And these are forever chemicals. That means the scientists cannot even calculate the half-life. And this was 20 years ago when DuPont thought it was safe, just like you're saying. Now they're saying, oh, sorry, guys, it's not safe. But these are forever in our environment. That like there's no way to necessarily, at this point, we don't know how to rehab that. So very relevant. So I'll shift to intuition, but I wanted to say that because I'm dealing with that in our own Colorado in our streams and water supplies, and it's here now and it's forever. There's no, these don't break down easily.
Does reverse osmosis filter remove those?
Yes. Yeah. So reverse osmosis and charcoal filters do remove those from your water supplies, so you can filter your water and be safe. And we now have testing. So if you have a functional doctor, you can ask the doctor for testing for PFAOs in the urine as well, which is brand new. Like that hasn't been out more than a few months. Okay, intuition. Let's talk about intuition because this is so key. This is why I wrote about finding resilience through functional medicine, science, and faith. You could kind of think of that as left brain, right brain, science, faith, masculine, feminine. There's these kind of parts of ourselves. And in medical school, I was trained to rely on the science. And I was actually born a highly intuitive healer, but I had to suppress that side of my nature, that intuitive, right brain, creative side, in order to fit in the masculinized academic engineering science setting of med school. Nothing wrong with that. We need the academics, we need the science, we need all of that. But what I did is in medical school, we were taught not to trust that intuitive part. That's why, like, as a third-year medical school student, when I sat with my gastroenterologist, I did like to tap in and say, can I trust this part of myself that says diet does have something to do with it? And I did. And fortunately, I found information that was valuable. But I always say it's almost like the left brain analytical part, which I love and I use, and I think it's important. It's almost like an old analog computer where you can process so many thousands of pieces of data in your mind, in your spreadsheets, and whatever process you use to organize that data. But when we shift the right brain, the intuitive, the heart space, our body all the time is taking in signals that we're not even consciously processing. It might be the temperature of the room. It might be the look in the person's eyes across from us who's telling us their story. It might be the way they're moving their body, pulling back, pulling closed. There's so many pieces of data. And even for us, as we go into a room, if say we're mold sensitive, we might smell something like, oh, this doesn't feel right, but we don't really know exactly what that means. So what happens in this realm, this right brain, intuitive based, heart based place, millions of pieces of data are coming into our subconscious in a fraction of a second. And what we have is a gestalt feeling about, just like you said with the pans, I don't feel this is right. And I've done that too. Like something just doesn't feel right about this. And I'm saying we can trust that because it processes all the analytical data we've had over our lifetimes. And it's actually our best pattern recognition system, which is a system that takes into account all of these many pieces of data. And what I found in my medical practice is as I start to lean towards that, not only for my own health and what I need to do to heal my body, because we're taught we can't trust our bodies. We have to go to the doctor to get their advice and their input and their suggestions. And I'm saying, no, your body has knowledge. And if you, and again, Magdalena, you are one of the queens of this as far as the types of recommendations you give your clients and also what you do, because that intuitive sense knows intuitively, I should go this direction, I shouldn't go this direction. And the more we can tap into that, the more we can actually get good information. And as a physician, when I use both, I have this access to way more solutions and way more ability to help that patient, because I might lean in and ask another question that just comes to mind as they're telling their story. And that question that I ask and the answer that the patient gives leads me in a totally different direction that actually gives us a solution to this problem that they previously were considered unsolvable or a medical mystery. I lost your sound, Magdalena.
I just realized I just muted myself, and
Yeah,
I'm surprised. Yeah. I wonder, like, what are some of the examples that we can give women, or
yes.
patients like who come into your practice where they can really apply their intuition? And just, can I just show you? So Chris here is saying, Chris and Marie saying such a great explanation. So sad the amount of doctors who have forever suppressed that and common sense as well. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So intuition, how else can we apply it?
Okay, so I'm going to give you some real practical things. One thing is, if you have had trauma, which we all have, some of us big T, some of us very horrific experiences, and I'm so sorry if that's you listening, some of us small T, and most of us have T's, traumas of all types. What this means is, as a child, something didn't make sense, or you were told you were too much or not enough, or that your academic achievement was how you received love, or there's so many different messages, or maybe, your parents were busy and they didn't have time for you and you thought you weren't worthy of love. There's many, many, many different things, and I'm just scratching the surface of the types of messages. But as those messages happen, and as we experience traumas and things in our life, we accumulate this system of thinking of how we view the world. And one of the ways we decrease the pain and sadness from old trauma is we live, I always say I lived above my head. Like, we live here, we think about our solution, we use our brains to solve the problem. That's actually a coping mechanism, not a bad one, a very healthy one. But what we do is we suppress, like, our heart feels a little bit sad, or our stomach feels a little bit unsettled and nauseous. And we start to I lived like this for many, many years. It got me through med school and some really tough times. I suppressed those just somatic based feelings that give us information. It gives us access to our human body. And so part of getting back into touch with that intuition is actually listening to our body. And it can be little signs of, like, again, we walk into a room, we just feel something's off. Have you ever had an experience where you went, maybe you met someone for dinner, or you went to a new space or a new room or a new building, and you just felt like, something's
seeing
off?
a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, something doesn't feel right. And you suppress that because you're like, oh, I'm making such a big deal about this. Yeah. Example, just the patient before me. He's telling me this story. He's from Canada, and he's telling me the story of certain rooms and places, like a certain restaurant he walks into, a certain building he works at. He walks in, he feels foggy, he feels funny, he has a sense of like malaise, and some buildings are fine and some aren't. He has no idea what mold toxicity is or how that works, but I'm listening to him tell me, and I thought, there's no way this guy doesn't have some sense of mold toxicity, and he's sensing these buildings he's going into are water damaged. And I told him the story of how mold can affect the brain and the mind, and how walking into different environments may set up you to feel this like malaise, or just something's off, or sinus pressure. And as I said it, you could have just, like, his eyes are wide. He's like, oh, that makes so much sense. I thought I was crazy. And there's this thing called medical gaslighting, where something's not right. Something doesn't feel right. You may not even be able to articulate what it is. It's hard to describe. But your doctor's like, well, your labs look great. Why don't you just come back in a year? Or why don't we give you an antidepressant? It sounds like you're depressed. How awful is that, when you're like, and then you start to not trust your body and your signs, because like, well, maybe my doctor knows best. Maybe I am depressed. And granted, you could be depressed, but there's probably some other explanation. And this is so common, where we're taught to deny our own signals. And part of the healing there is actually listening. I'll often put my hand on my heart and one on my belly and just close my eyes and tap in, and what do I need today, or how am I feeling today? And I had to really relearn that, because I was stuck in my head for many, many years.
Yeah. Hey guys, we're talking about Unexpected, Dr. Jill Carnahan's latest book, and we're gonna do a book giveaway. Yeah, so my ask is, if you could share with us, so the winner, right? The book is gonna go to a winner, and what I'm looking for is a short version of your story about how you could or you have applied your intuition in your own healing journey? So tell us like a little story, and then we share that with us as well, with you guys as well. Gina is saying the doctor's telling me that I have an autoimmune disease. They need to do more testing, but they are telling me that the titer numbers on labs are very high. I have changed my diet, cutting out a lot of foods that cause inflammation, no dairy, etc., but gluten-free. Regardless what kind of autoimmune disease I have, I've managed without medicine. My intuition tells me I can. Your thoughts, please.
Oh, good one. No, Gina, I love that. Okay, so I faced Crohn's disease. My doctor, after the diagnosis, told me, Jill, this is incurable. You're going to have it forever, lifelong, right? Just like your doctor. I didn't believe that. I was like, that can't be true. And there's something now, I call it reversible autoimmunity. When we get to root cause through functional medicine, the gut or the immune system inflammation or other triggers, like for you, it might have been gluten. And often there's more than one. It might not be just gluten. But in my own life, I'm considered cured of Crohn's disease. I was told it was incurable. And I literally have no symptoms, no signs of the disease 20 years later. So you too, I believe any person with autoimmunity has the potential to heal. So your intuition is spot on. And I would just continue to follow, sounds like your doc is working with you and the things that you're doing already. But I love that story because your intuition there is right on. And I just would continue to encourage you to follow it.
Yeah. The book is now on pre-order on Amazon. Just go on Amazon, look out for Unexpected, Dr. Jill Carnahan, and you can pre-order it. It ships, I believe, in March. Is that correct?
March 28th.
Yeah. And Dr. Jill also has some really cool bonuses. So what you need to do is when you get the book, then you go to readunexpected.com and you get like coloring book. It literally is a coloring book. So I want to ask you about that because I feel kind of childish going to a coffee shop and coloring, but okay, you're gonna straighten me up here, Dr. Jill.
I'm gonna meet you for coffee one day, and I'll tell you something funny. I learned because a part of my healing was like going back to my child self and having that playfulness that we kind of suppressed because it was like, oh, that's childish, which could be coloring, could be dancing, could be playing, could be like getting your fingers in the earth and doing gardening, and that's not childish, but like these really like playful organic things. And part of my healing was going back to color. And now in my car, I ride around, and in the back seat, there's a beautiful bag with coloring pencils and coloring markers and tons of coloring books. And when I meet friends for coffee, I often go get that pink bag with big fluffy balls. And I say, hey, would you like to color with me? And just like you, some of these like, but what happens in that coloring, it kind of brings us back to the state of like joy and childlikeness in a healthy way. And so often the conversations that I have when we're coloring are deep, profound, amazing, transformational conversations.
So tell us about the bonuses. So apart from the journal, you get the book, you get the coloring journal, and what else?
Yeah, so I recorded a secret chapter that I didn't get in the book, but it's really good content, and you get that. I'm reading it actually, and then I have a lecture that was the most popular lecture I've done. It's called it's on mast cell activation, which is a disorder that can happen when your mast cells create too much histamine, can cause pain, inflammation, and many people are having symptoms of mast cell activation and don't even know it. So it's just a lecture on how you might know what it is, what to do about it, and all of the details on mast cell activation.
Oh, this is sign. This is all such a blessing. Thank you. I saw blast. It's like how you see things that you want to see. I think it is a blast still too. Do you do training for clinicians? I'm a grief therapist and would love to have more skills with trauma.
Mm-hmm. I do not, but I am planning for future master classes. So stay tuned on that. I also have a documentary that we're waiting on distribution, but that hopefully will come out in the next year as well. And that goes the same kind of story here, kind of getting deep with trauma. If you haven't read Gabor Mate, Peter Levine, or Bessel van der Kolk, those are top 3 of the somatic kinds of, and they are experts. So you can read their work and dive deep into that information.
So let's talk a little bit about, and by the way, you guys, so we talked about the book, we talked about the giveaway. Okay, so we got that covered. I wanted to ask you, like, I think writing is highly therapeutic, right? And I mean, in a lot of therapies, writing is used as a form of, a therapy actually, right? Because we process a lot of things as we write. So my question for you is like, as you wrote the book, what journey did it take you on? Like, what have you learned about yourself? What has changed for you? What was like, I teach this stuff, but it's like, there's another layer of learning to this.
Oh my goodness, so much. And you're 100% right. So years ago, when I had the idea for the book, I knew I was going to tell my story, breast cancer, Crohn's, autoimmunity, and actually like more the environmental toxicity. That tends to be my thing, whether it's mold or environmental toxins. That's what I teach about. That's what I treat patients with. But what happened is I went through a very difficult divorce that was unexpected. And then after the divorce, I dated had several relationships that were so toxic. Now I look back, I'm like, who was that girl that was thinking this was okay? I mean, I literally mentioned in the book, I dated an ex-FBI, LAPD man who ended up being abusive. I filed a restraining order, and a few days after, he committed suicide. I mean, yeah, I know, Magdalena, it's just horrific. And then following that, I dated an ex-felon who was an alcoholic. I mean, these are like, who am I that I'm dating these people? But what happened is this, and this is so important. I just posted on the day after Valentine's Day, which is Singles Day. And it was about, if we don't love and view ourselves with wholeness and deal with the trauma, we're going to allow and attract what we feel about ourselves. And so this was just a reflection to me that I did not feel very good about myself. I did not feel that I was worthy of love. I did not feel that I was worthy of a good man that was kind and healthy and non-abusive. And it took me that, unfortunately for me, or fortunately, all of my life journey, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or relational, has been experiential. So for me, I learned some profound lessons about unhealthy relationships, about manipulation and abuse, even emotional manipulation and abuse. And those lessons are now in my heart and soul. And I will never date that kind of man again, because those things allowed me to transform who I think I am. And it's part of that intuition too, because we can't truly love and accept ourselves for who we are until we trust our intuition. Like, those two things go hand in hand. And all this to say, literally some of the writing was like during these episodes. And the book took a lot longer than I expected, because I feel like the divine had a lot more lessons for me to learn. But writing through that, one specific thing I talk about in, I think, chapter 6, I wrote a letter to my father. And I have an amazing father. I mean, the most kind, dedicated. But there were little things from my childhood that I wanted to just ask him about and talk about. And I literally sat down and cried my eyes out and wrote him a letter. And that was during the writing of the book. And that letter, and again, we have a great relationship. There's no history of trauma or abuse, but it's just like the healing between a daughter and a father, or a daughter and a mother. And I did that work during the writing of the book, and it was so profound. And then I was able to write about it in a way that I hope, if you have any standing issues with your parents, you can heal that yourself. I literally write in the book, if you have any issues right now, stop and think about this. Maybe journal or write your parents a letter, or someone that you love, because these things, hopefully for the reader, can be transformational, just like they were for me.
So many things I want to ask you, and we have so little time, but so I'll say, just go and get the book. It's a fascinating book, because you really marry the whole aspect of like the soft skills, right? Of the intuition, like the really touching into, going deep into your soul and looking at yourself in a way that we are so disconnected from. On the other hand, you have a lot of very practical advice. So I just want to make sure that for those of you who are like, give me the protocol, I want the protocol. I don't want the intuition stuff that's not tangible enough, right? You find that there too. So talk to us a little bit about, like, what was the purpose of doing this book? Like, what did you want to help people? Because I know you are like so focused on, I mean, one of the lovely things about you, I think, is not just the fact that you are so good at what you do, and that's why you have such a long wait list of patients with complicated cases, but it's also because you have such a warm, loving, giving personality that is so lovable, personable, right? And it's just like, you just attract people to you, maybe good and bad. I don't know, hopefully it's only the good ones. So after all the work you've done, right? But I and one of the admirable qualities about you, you're very mission-based, right? You do a lot of things because you really, like, I remember when COVID happened, and it's like the amount of research that you went into and the depth that you went into at the risk of there were consequences to your publications, right? And you still went ahead and you did it because you wanted to help patients. And so I'm sure that was your big thing behind the book, was to really help people. So tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what did you want to change?
Yes. Oh, Magdalena, first of all, just thank you for seeing me and being so kind in your words, because I do feel like you get that level of mission. And at the core, number one, I wanted to be a reflection, a mirror to the reader. It's my story, but it's just not really about me. It's really about you, the reader. And what I want for you more than anything, whether I've met you or never met you, I want you to experience transformation in your life, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, any sort of possibility there. I want people out there to be able to experience the kind of transformation that I've experienced. And I think it's possible. So my goal is to share whatever I can in my heart and soul and my experiences. Number two, when we take suffering and difficulty and trauma, and we find the teaching elements in them, and then we integrate them, and then we share them with the world. And again, you guys out there listening each have your own circle of people, and you can do this just like I can, even if you don't have a book. Then it takes and adds value to the suffering, which is weird, right? When we suffer, I did not like breast cancer, and I hope no one ever has to go through what I went through. But what happened in the journey was I found pearls in the midst of the difficulty. And if I can teach people how to look at the world in a way that views difficulty, uncertainty, trauma, suffering with a lens that allows us to search for deeper meaning, it makes anything possible. And it also allows us to be the true form of resilience, which is no matter what comes my way, I know that I'll have the resources to be able to deal with that. I don't care. You could name any tragedy. It might not be fun. It might be painful. And same for you listening. But I know that you and I both can find resources and things that we need within that. And then lastly, you touched on this, and I am motivated by one thing, and that is to be love to the world and to show people how to love. Like, it touches me so deeply, because truly, like, our world, if there's one thing we need, it's genuine, unconditional love, without judgment, without anything, just creating a space. And I heard someone once say, love is creating a space for someone to be their optimal best version of themselves, or to create a space of transformation. And that's what I want to do for anyone out there that I come in contact with.
Nice. Can you talk about, actually, I want to ask you, I feel like I'm more inclined towards the stories. By the way, for those of you who you want a protocol on toxicity for mold, for this, that, it's all in here. It's like the labs and I talk so much about this all the time, and I'm just thinking, like, let's just maybe explore the softer side of things.
Yeah.
I want to ask you if you could give us an example of a patient, because you kind of open up with the story of a patient. Give us a story, share with us a story of someone who has applied the softer side of, what you're teaching in the book, right? Of intuition and boundaries and awareness of toxic relationships, whether in the past or currently. And that was pivotal in their own healing journey, in spite of seeing you, because they could have gone and seen a shrink, right? And be like, or a therapist of some sort, or have some somatic experiencing done or whatever, right? But they went to see Dr. Jill because they want to, like, what's the supplement? What's the labs that I need to do? What's the protocol that I need to do, right? And then when you realize, like, okay, so tell us about patients like that, or examples.
Yeah, so there's someone I've treated for almost a decade. I saw him very early in my practice here, and have followed him and his wife and two beautiful children and in this journey, and just recently talked to him again. And he dealt with Lyme disease, which is not uncommon, and mold issues. Again, they often go together. So he had chronic severe pain, dealt with this most of his life, and with the support of his wife, really was able to overcome this. But in the last several years, as we talked about this, we just recently talked about he had some sort of a bladder issue, and realized that he was holding his urine like he wouldn't even use. He just work. He was all about work. Mm-hmm. And what I really realized in this, as I'm talking to him, is I'm like, you have suppressed, just so we talked about living in your mind above your body, you have suppressed. And I just talked to another doctor that is well known, was on a podcast about During medical school, same thing. We're taught to suppress our urge for thirst, our hunger, our need for sleep, our need for food, our need to go to the bathroom at all. And we're taught to like work through those. And actually it is a honor if you can like go 6 or 12 hours during a surgery retracting and not need to use a restroom. Like that's touted as a high level of achievement. That's crazy. That's completely denying yourself. So in this person's life, I remember that. And I heard him speaking and I said, you need to be kind to yourself. You need to take care of yourself. And we really talked through that transformation. It turned out there was a lot of family patterns of pleasing his father and trying to be successful, trying to earn love through achievement. And that transformation has completely allowed him to go to a new level in his health.
Yeah. Gina is saying, so grateful for this live. It really makes me know I can overcome an autoimmune disease I'm having to deal with. Yeah. It's one of the things that I think your book does really well is like you said, finding the pearls in the disease, which I also look at that as a reframing, right? Because on one hand, we'll be like, why me?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I so sick? I've got a pretty clean diet compared to a lot of other people who eat rubbish, and
Yes.
they seem to be perfectly fine, right? And so it's like that, why me? And I feel like almost everyone who is reflective enough and you spend a bit of time on reflecting on your own condition, there is so much of learning in that. And
Yes.
and it's almost like you buying the best insurance policy you can ever buy for yourself, because an autoimmune disease is probably going to set you up in a better direction in terms of diet, lifestyle, sleep, movement, whatever it might be, detoxification, right? And it will probably give you a much better longevity in health in the long term, so that's definitely one reframe to look at. Karen's saying, looking forward to this book. Gina is saying, I'm looking forward to reading the book. Karen is saying, my intuition told me that I could heal my fibroids, follow Magdalena, and change my diet, what I put on my body, on my body, and started to do the self work on myself, and I got rid of 3 fibroids. That's fantastic.
Amazing.
And you guys, the URL, Jill, just now, somebody said that it wasn't correct, so I just checked it out. I think it's a www.
Yeah.
Read Unexpected. So you guys can. That's what you get the bonuses from. So let's see. Let's do another one. Faye saying, I'm in the process of transforming generational trauma and using my experience to help women to heal. My mother is my why. She passed away from cancer at 66 because didn't have the courage to leave my father. Autoimmune conditions ran in my family. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
There's a book, It Didn't Start With You. Mark Wolin, I believe, that talks about if you wanted just a place to start, just something I read and touched me deeply. And what happened to you. They're kind of similar titles. It Didn't Start With You. And then it didn't, What Happened to You is Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And those are 2 great kind of recent books that talk about generational trauma and childhood trauma and how to transform. Might get you started if you're new to that world.
Yeah. Last question I have for you is, what work do you feel like you still got ahead of you?
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting you asked that because I love my practice. I'm not going to stop practicing. So don't worry if you're out there. If you've seen me as a patient, I'm going to be here. That's my favorite thing to do, is sitting here with patients. That'll never change. But I feel really, really called, kind of like you said, mission-based, to teach more teachers and influence more influencers. So if I can start to impact the people out there that are impacting other people, whether it's other doctors or people who are in the health-related world. And that's why I worked on the documentary last year. Again, that's not out yet. It's called Doctor Patient. That'll be coming. So stay tuned. I don't know where it'll be exactly because we're waiting on distribution, but that is going to also be a place. And then probably I'll continue writing and speaking and teaching because I really am passionate about helping. And I'm passionate about helping your doctor to learn there's more. So that would be my biggest passion, is other doctors. If I can start to transform the system from within, that would be my greatest joy.
Let's do one more before we wrap up. Phyllis is saying, I have 7 different illnesses plus 2 autoimmune diseases, possibly another one to be diagnosed soon. All I deal with is genetic. Mother, grandmother have counseled with dietitians, counselors, prayer, etc. If genetics can be changed, please let me know. Thank you.
Phyllis. So there's something called epigenetics. So we say when I teach, I say 80% of our diseases are environmentally based, only 20% are genetic. Now, there are a few things that are hereditary and they are absolutely dominant, which means that there's not a lot of change. But most of the things that are genetic predispositions, we have this ability. Epi just means above the genes. So diet, nutrition, lifestyle, chemicals can all change the expression of genes, which means most of the things, even if you're prone to them genetically. And I look at genes of patients, but I know that I can manipulate and transform the expression of those genes. So even that has the potential to heal.
Yeah. So good to see you.
You too, Magdalena.
I'm so glad we did this. You guys, for those of you joining a little bit late, Unexpected is the book really about intuition and addressing your toxicity on every level, relationships, mindset, time, people, toxins, food, you name it. It's all in here. And it's not a huge book, but it's a very, it's like every page delivers a punch. You kind of, Tanya is saying I just pre-ordered the book. Can't wait. Yeah. I'm very blessed to have the early copy. Thank you so much for being here today with us. All the best with the book. I'm sure it's going to be a big revelation, especially for people who are going to read it. I will tell you that this has even changed my own thing in the past couple of days when I started reading the book in the mornings. I just took some time out this morning and we have this beautiful snowy day today. Well, let me just show you because I'm up in the mountains.
Oh,
right?
Gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. And this morning was a little cold, but, I went outside and I just took my time in walking the dogs. And it wasn't like, like off to the next thing. And I'm working on this new, formula and for fibroids. And so I've got to get all the notes to the formulator. And, there's always, we always got something going on, right? And instead I'm just like, Dr. Jill says, slow the fuck down.
Yeah.
enjoy the I even managed to do a quick video on my deck, with a little with you just appreciating just how incredibly beautiful it is. And we don't have days like this every day. We have less and less snow with the climate change. So so it's just like something that even on a daily basis, it was such a wonderful, and I feel like I had a completely different way that my day has unfolded as I slowed down a little bit and started being much more appreciative of the little things like that. So thank you.
You're welcome. And we're going to have a coloring day, so we'll be in touch. So
yeah. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And I know it's a little bit unusual to hear from me because you typically see me talking about a lot more sort of the left brain. Is the left brain correct? Yeah, the left brain things. And so this was a little bit different. But, as you all probably know, your own mindset can play a huge role. So, yeah. Okay, well, thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. I feel like we're getting ready for the weekend. All the best for the book, Dr. Jill. And we'll see you guys very soon. Bye for now.